Welcome to Games Lore to Sleep. Tonight, we're drifting through the entire lore of Elden Ring, a complete telling of the lands between, from the first golden light that fell from the cosmos to the fractured world left behind after the Shattering. This is a story of gods who shaped reality itself, of queens who defied fate, and of mortals caught beneath powers far greater than themselves. There's nothing you need to focus on, nothing you need to remember. Let the names come and go. Let the details blur softly together. Whether you stay awake for the whole journey or fall asleep somewhere along the way, this story will continue patiently without you. So get comfortable, lower the volume just enough, and allow yourself to rest. Long before the Earth Tree stood radiant against the sky, before grace traced golden lines across the land, before gods, thrones, and wars shaped history, there was a moment of arrival. From the vastness beyond the world, something crossed the silent void. It did not drift aimlessly. It did not fall by accident. It was sent. A golden star descended from the darkness between worlds, cutting through the emptiness until it reached a land that had no name yet, a place of shifting forms, ancient life, and unbound possibility. Within this star was a presence, a will, and a purpose. This was not a god in the mortal sense. It was an instrument, a manifestation of an outer god known as the Greater Will. Outer gods did not walk the earth. They did not rule through voices or armies. Instead, they shaped reality indirectly, acting through laws, symbols, and chosen vessels. Their influence was subtle, but absolute. The golden star embedded itself into the land, and with it came structure. The being within would later be known as the Elden beast, though in that age, names were unnecessary. It was a living expression of order, not moral order, but cosmic order. It defined how things were meant to exist. Life, death, causality, regression. Before its arrival, the world existed in a primordial state. Life flowed freely, unconstrained by rigid categories. Creatures bore traits now considered monstrous. Wings, horns, scales, tails, not as curses, but as signs of closeness to creation itself. This era was governed by the crucible, the source from which all life blended together before being shaped into distinct forms. The arrival of order changed everything. The Elden beast did not conquer the world. It rewrote it in time, the being transformed, not into stone or flesh, but into principle. Its essence became the Elden Ring, a collection of great runes bound together, each governing a fundamental aspect of reality. The Elden Ring was not worn. It was not carried. It existed as the foundation of the world. With it came permanence, predictability, stability, and at the center of this new structure, something vast began to grow. The Earth Tree. It rose from the land like a pillar of living gold, its branches stretching into the sky, its roots burrowing deep into the earth. Light flowed from it endlessly, bathing the land in a soft, unwavering glow. To live beneath the Earth Tree was to exist within the system of the Golden Order. Grace flowed outward from its light, touching certain beings, guiding them, binding them to purpose. Life and death were no longer wild forces. They were managed, reincorporated, recycled. At first the world resisted. Ancient dragons ruled the skies, their stone scales rendering them nearly eternal. Beasts born of the crucible still walked freely, embodying a time before division. Giants, colossal and flame-touched, lived according to laws older than order itself. But the Golden Order was patient. Wars followed, not merely for territory, but for definition. Those who could not conform were pushed aside, reclassified, or destroyed. Over generations, Opposition faded into legend. What remained was unity. But order requires a ruler, not a creator. The greater will did not create gods freely, but a vessel capable of bearing the Elden Ring's power. From beyond the lands between came a woman of the Newman, a mysterious people said to originate outside the world itself. Her past is largely unknown, her early life erased by time, but her destiny was absolute. Her name was Marika. Chosen by the greater will, Marika became the vessel of the Elden Ring. Through her, the Golden Order was no longer abstract, it was enforced. Law became divine decree. Reality followed structure rather than instinct. Marika's ascension marked the true beginning of the Age of the Erdtree. Under her rule, the principles of the Golden Order crystallized. Two laws defined existence above all else: regression, the pull of all things toward a single origin; causality, the chain linking every action to consequence. Together they ensured that nothing strayed too far, and nothing escaped the system entirely. Yet even as the Golden Order dominated the world, it was not alone. Other outer gods lingered beyond reality's edge. Some whispered decay into living flesh. Some kindled madness through unfiltered emotion. Some embodied death itself, waiting patiently for relevance. Their influence crept quietly into the world, through rot that bloomed beneath the surface, through flame that refused to die, through frenzied thoughts that shattered minds. Marika saw these forces not as equals, but as threats, and so she made a decision that would define everything that followed. She removed destined death from the Elden Ring. The rune of death, the principle that allowed beings to truly die, was sealed away. Mortality was rewritten. Death became temporary, incomplete. Those who fell no longer passed on. Their souls returned to the Erdtree, reabsorbed, reused. The Golden Order became eternal. But eternity is not peace, it is stagnation. And beneath the golden light of the Erdtree, something began to fracture quietly, slowly, as the cost of denying death settled into the world. Because even gods cannot remove consequence, only delay it. When Marika became a god, the world did not tremble. There was no thunder, no eruption of light, no sudden rewriting of reality that mortals could witness in a single moment. Instead, the change arrived quietly, like a rule being enforced rather than announced. Marika did not create the Golden Order, it already existed, defined by the Elden Ring and the will behind it. What she became was its vessel, its interpreter, its living authority. Through her, the laws of the world gained a voice. From the moment of her ascension, Marika ceased to be merely a ruler. She became structure given form. To obey her was to obey the nature of reality itself. And so, the Age of the Erdtree truly began. Under Marika's rule, the Golden Order spread with calm inevitability. This was not conquest driven by chaos or desperation. It was expansion guided by certainty. Lands that resisted were not simply defeated, they were corrected. Ancient ways were reclassified as heresy. Primordial traits once revered were declared impure. Those touched by the crucible, horned, winged, or scaled, were pushed to the margins. Order does not destroy everything it replaces. It relabels. Marika's reign reshaped belief itself. The Erdtree became more than a source of light. It became a symbol of legitimacy. To be blessed by grace was to be favored by the world. To be denied, it was to exist in quiet opposition. Grace did not fall upon everyone. It chose. And those it touched were guided, their paths subtly corrected, their failures reframed as lessons, their survival reinforced by unseen hands. Grace did not compel. It encouraged, it nudged. This guidance created loyalty deeper than fear ever could. People did not follow Marika because they were forced to. They followed her because reality rewarded obedience. Yet even gods require partners. Marika took a consort, a champion whose strength embodied the Order's dominance, a warrior unmatched, whose presence alone turned battles. Together they led campaigns that cemented the Erdtree's supremacy. The giants were crushed, the ancient dragons were broken, opposition fell, one by one. But victory carried consequences. The world beneath the Erdtree grew stable and rigid. Life continued, but always within boundaries. Change slowed, progress looped inward. With death removed, endings lost meaning. Marika began to notice the cracks. Immortality did not bring peace. It brought repetition. Beings lived on, long after purpose had thinned. Conflicts lingered without resolution. Grief could not complete itself. Souls returned endlessly to the Erdtree, recycled without rest. The world endured, but it did not heal. And somewhere within Marika, doubt took root. Not rebellion, not yet, just awareness. She began to see the Golden Order not as balance, but as constraint. A system designed not to nurture life, but to preserve control. The Greater Will did not care for growth or meaning. It cared for continuity, and continuity demanded obedience. Marika's response was not immediate. Gods move slowly, and consequences move slower still. But her actions began to change, subtly at first. She questioned. She withheld. She acted in ways that bent the rules without openly breaking them. One of her most significant acts was the creation of her children, demigods born into divine lineage, each carrying fragments of power and influence. They were meant to extend the Golden Order's reach. Instead, they became reflections of its instability. Some embodied perfection. Some embodied excess. Some embodied decay. Each child revealed something the Order could not fully control. And still, Marika maintained her role. Outwardly, she was the unquestioned god of the lands between. Inwardly, she was a figure caught between obedience and doubt, between divine responsibility and personal will. The Greater Will remained silent. It always did. Outer gods do not explain themselves. They do not justify. They simply expect alignment. Marika understood this. And she understood something else as well. As long as the Elden Ring remained whole, as long as the Golden Order stood unchallenged, nothing would truly change. The world would endure forever, frozen in a loop of light without release. This realization did not bring clarity. It brought conflict, and from that conflict, a fracture would eventually form, one powerful enough to shatter gods, break history, and scatter the laws of reality itself across the land. But that moment had not yet arrived. For now, the Erdtree still shone, grace still guided, and Queen Marika still ruled, a god bound to an order she no longer fully believed in. Power, when divided, does not weaken, it changes. Under Queen Marika's rule, the Golden Order appeared unshakable. The Erdtree stood radiant. Grace continued to guide the faithful. The laws of reality held firm. But beneath that calm surface, something subtle was happening. The Elden Ring was whole, yet its influence was spreading outward, fragment by fragment. Marika's children were born into divinity, but they were not identical reflections of their mother or the Greater Will. Each carried a different expression of power. Each embodied a different response to the Golden Order. They were demigods, not fully gods, not truly mortal. And through them, the Order began to reveal its cracks. Some of Marika's children were born of duty, others of passion. Some were shaped by ambition, others by rejection. Together they formed a constellation of influence across the lands between, each ruling over a domain, each drawing followers who resonated with their nature. There was Godwyn, firstborn and favored, golden, radiant, beloved by many. He represented everything the Golden Order wished to be seen as: noble, strong, stable. Godwin was proof that Marika's rule could produce harmony rather than stagnation. There were the twins, born cursed in different ways. Millennia, afflicted with scarlet rot, decay given form. Her body slowly consumed itself, even as her will remained unbroken. She learned to fight not to win quickly, but to endure endlessly. Her brother, Michaela, was eternally youthful, brilliant, gentle, and trapped in a body that would never mature. Where others sought power through domination, Michaela sought transformation through compassion. Then there were those who drifted further from the Erdtree's light. Some embraced strength without restraint. Some clung to forbidden knowledge. Some turned their backs on grace entirely. Each demigod believed they understood the Golden Order better than the others. Each believed they were uniquely suited to shape the future. Marika watched. She did not intervene. Because conflict was not yet rebellion. It was possibility. The demigods were granted great runes, fragments of the Elden Ring itself. These runes amplified their nature, granting authority that reshaped the lands they ruled. But power magnifies imbalance as easily as it does virtue, and imbalance does not stay contained. As demigods grew more isolated within their own domains, unity faded, alliances weakened, philosophies diverged. The Golden Order remained intact in theory, but in practice it became interpretation rather than law. Faith splintered. Some believed the Order must be preserved exactly as it was. Others believed it must evolve. Others still believed it was a lie that needed to be escaped. The greater will remained silent through it all. Outer gods do not guide through conversation. They allow systems to test themselves, and systems eventually fail. Marika's doubt deepened as she watched her children drift apart. The demigods were not merely inheritors of power, they were mirrors reflecting the flaws of the Order itself. Immortality bred stagnation. Stagnation bred resentment. Resentment bred ambition, and ambition, when given divine authority, becomes catastrophe. The first true fracture came quietly, not through war, not through proclamation, but through death. Godwin was killed, not in battle, not as part of a grand conflict, but through an act so precise, so calculated, that it shattered the illusion of eternal order. His death did not simply remove a demigod from the world. It proved something unthinkable. That death, true death, was still possible. And once that truth entered the world, nothing could contain it. The Golden Order had been built on the denial of endings, on the promise that death was no longer final. Godwin's death exposed the lie beneath that promise. Marika felt it immediately. The fracture had begun. But it was not yet complete. The demigods did not unite in grief. They did not seek understanding. They reached for power. And the Elden Ring, whole yet strained, waited for the moment it would finally. History often marks its turning points with fire and noise. But the end of the Golden Order's certainty did not arrive in flames. It arrived in silence. Long after the Erdtree's light had become familiar, long after the demigods had grown comfortable in their power, there came a single night that changed the course of the lands between forever. It would later be remembered as the Night of Black Knives. Few witnessed it, fewer still understood it. But its echo would never fade. On that night, a group of assassins moved unseen through the world. They did not wear banners. They did not declare allegiance. Their blades were not forged for war, but for precision. Each carried a dagger infused with a fragment of destined death, power stolen from its seal, death in its purest and most final form. This alone should have been impossible. Destined death had been removed from the Elden Ring, hidden away to preserve immortality. For a blade to carry it meant that someone had defied the very structure of reality. Someone had planned this. The assassins were women of the Newman, the same distant people from whom Queen Marika herself originated. Their movements were graceful, their strikes exact, their purpose unwavering. They did not strike randomly. They struck one target, Godwyn the Golden. Favored son, symbol of stability, proof that the Golden Order could endure. When the blades found him, his death was not loud. There was no battlefield, no desperate struggle, only a moment where immortality failed. Godwyn's soul was destroyed, not diminished, not recycled, erased. His body lived on, empty and malformed, spreading corruption through the roots of the Erdtree itself. Deathroot crept outward from him, twisting life wherever it touched. This was the first true death of a demigod, and it broke something fundamental. The Golden Order had promised eternity. Godwyn's death proved that promise false. If one demigod could die, then none were truly safe. Fear spread quietly. Blame followed. The demigods turned inward, suspicious not only of each other, but of the system that had failed to protect them. Trust fractured. Alliances dissolved. Queen Marika felt the rupture more deeply than anyone. She had removed destined death to protect the world from endings. Yet now death had returned, not as balance, but as betrayal. Someone had accessed what should have been unreachable. Whether Marika sanctioned the act or merely allowed it remains uncertain. History records only the result. Her faith in the Golden Order collapsed, and in that moment of clarity she acted. Marika shattered the Elden Ring, not out of rage, not out of madness, but out of refusal. The ring did not explode, it did not vanish. It fractured, its great runes scattering across the lands between, each one carrying a distorted piece of the world's laws. Reality itself splintered. The Erdtree dimmed. Grace faltered. Order lost its cohesion. The greater will recoiled. This was defiance, and defiance demanded consequence. Marika was imprisoned within the Erdtree, suspended in a state between punishment and preservation. The god who once enforced order was now bound by it. In her absence, the demigods claimed the great runes, and then they fought. The war that followed was not swift, it was not glorious. It was a grinding collapse known as the Shattering. Demigod turned against demigod. Battles scarred the land permanently. Regions warped to reflect the will of their rulers. Once unified territory became a patchwork of isolated domains, each ruled by a fractured philosophy. No one truly won. The greater will withdrew its direct guidance. Grace became selective, unreliable. Many lost it entirely. The lands between entered a long, slow decay. Immortality remained, but purpose did not. Those who died rose again, hollowed by repetition. Soldiers fought endless wars with no memory of why they began. Castles stood half-manned, defended by habit rather than hope. The Shattering did not end the world. It hollowed it. And somewhere beneath the broken Erdtree, Marika waited, silent, bound, watching a future she could no longer shape. Long after the Shattering scarred the lands between, long after the demigods retreated into their fractured domains, there remained a group of people the Golden Order had already forgotten. They were not cursed. They were not defeated. They were simply dismissed. They were called the Tarnished. Once these people had known grace. They had lived beneath the Erdtree's light, guided by its quiet pull. They had fought in wars that shaped the age, shed blood in the name of order, and believed, like so many others, that their purpose was eternal. Then, one day, grace left them. It did not announce its departure. It did not explain itself. It simply withdrew. Those who lost grace were no longer guided, no longer protected, no longer connected to the system that sustained immortality and meaning. One by one, they were cast out of the lands between, exiled, stripped of blessing, stripped of destiny, stripped of relevance. They crossed the fog and vanished into distant lands, places beyond the Erdtree's influence, where death functioned normally and time moved forward without looping back on itself. For generations, the Tarnished lived and died as mortals. They aged, they forgot, they became stories told poorly, then not told at all, and yet something remained. A faint connection, a thread stretched thin but never fully severed. When the Shattering left the lands between leaderless and broken, that thread began to stir. Grace returned, not to everyone, not all at once, but to the Tarnished. Across distant lands, long-dead warriors opened their eyes. Bodies long turned to dust reformed. Consciousness returned slowly, disoriented, incomplete. They awoke with no banners to follow, no gods to serve, no clear promise of reward, only a quiet pull, a golden guidance pointing inward toward home. The Tarnished were called back not because they were special, but because they were outside the system that had failed. They had lived without the Tree, died without recycling, forgotten without hollowing. They were survivors of irrelevance. When they returned to the lands between, they found a world that barely remembered itself. Roads overgrown, strongholds occupied by creatures that no longer understood why they guarded them, fields stained by wars that never ended properly. The demigods still lived, immortal, powerful, entrenched. Each clung to a great rune, believing themselves the rightful inheritor of the world's future. But none of them ruled. The greater will did not speak to them. Grace did not guide them. Instead, it followed the Tarnished, not with enthusiasm, not with faith, but with necessity. The Tarnished were given a task that was never stated plainly, only implied through direction and silence. Collect the great runes, restore the Elden Ring, become something capable of reshaping order, not because the greater will believed in them, but because there was no one else left. The Tarnished began their journey not as heroes, but as intruders. Every land they entered resisted them. Every demigod they approached viewed them as an inconvenience at best, a threat at worst. And yet the Tarnished persisted. They died, they rose again, they learned. Each death taught caution rather than despair. Each victory felt hollow, stripped of celebration. The lands between did not cheer for saviors. It barely noticed them. Along the way, the Tarnished met others like themselves, wanderers chasing guidance they barely understood. Some clung desperately to grace, fearing its loss more than death itself. Others rejected it, suspicious of any force that claimed to guide while remaining silent. All of them were searching for meaning in a world where gods had failed. Grace did not explain why it chose the Tarnished. Perhaps because exile had given them perspective. Perhaps because death had given them humility. Perhaps because those who had lost everything were less likely to cling to illusions. The truth remains uncertain, but the path forward became clear. To stand before the Tree, to confront the demigods, to decide what shape the world would take next, the Tarnished would have to walk through the ruins of every failed philosophy that came before. And as they stepped deeper into the lands between, one thing became undeniable. The return of the Tarnished was not salvation. It was the final test. The lands between no longer function as a single world. They exist as fragments. Each region is shaped not only by geography, but by the will of the demigod who claimed it. When the Elden Ring shattered, the great runes did more than empower their bearers. They distorted reality around them. The land became belief made physical. As the Tarnished travels onward, this truth becomes impossible to ignore. Each domain feels self-contained, as though it belongs to a different age, frozen in a moment that never quite resolves. Storms linger where war never ended. Rot blooms where hope was abandoned. Stone refuses to crumble where pride will not yield. The first great domain rises from the coast, battered by endless wind and rain. A fortress of torn banners and broken walls stands against the sky. locked in perpetual siege. Soldiers fight on out of habit, not strategy. Horns sound, blades clash, but there is no progress, no conclusion. This land is ruled by ambition. Its lord clings to power through strength alone, convinced that dominance is proof of legitimacy. Every challenge is answered with force. Every question is silenced by violence. Yet even here, time does not move forward. Battles repeat. Victories mean nothing. Defeat is temporary. The war continues not because it must, but because no one remembers how to stop. Further inland, the land softens, then sickens. Scarlet rot seeps through soil and stone alike, blooming in slow, beautiful patterns that conceal devastation beneath. Trees stand half alive, their branches heavy with crimson growth. The air feels warm, thick, and strangely calm. This domain is shaped by endurance. Its ruler does not conquer. She persists. Here, conflict is not explosive but inevitable. Every movement spreads decay. Every effort to resist only deepens the wound. Soldiers march knowing they will rot, yet they march anyway. The rot does not hate. It simply continues. And so does the war. Beyond this lies a region trapped between brilliance and delusion. Golden streets shine beneath false sunlight. Architecture rises in perfect symmetry, untouched by decay, not because time has spared it, but because it has been denied permission to move. This land believes itself pure. Here, order is enforced not with armies, but with certainty. Those who live within its walls believe the world can still be fixed, if only everyone would follow the correct rules. But certainty is fragile. Behind every pristine fade lies fear. Fear that impurity will spread. Fear that change will unravel the illusion. Fear that the golden order, once absolute, is no longer enough. So the gates remain closed, the guards remain vigilant, and the war continues quietly. In the far reaches, places exist that barely resemble kingdoms at all. Collapsed cities sink into the earth, ruled by beings who abandoned grace long ago. Knowledge festers in forgotten academies, where scholars study truth not to improve the world, but to escape it. Here, reason has turned inward. Magic bends reality, not to serve life, but to avoid confronting its failure. Experiments continue long after their purpose is forgotten. Students remain trapped in endless study, unable to move forward or let go. Learning becomes its own prison. And still, the demigods do not act. They wait. Each believes time is on their side. Each believes the Tarnished is a passing inconvenience, not a reckoning. The Shattering war never truly ended because no one was willing to risk finality. Immortality removed urgency. Power removed compromise. And so the lands between exist in a state of suspended collapse, not dying, not healing, simply persisting. The Tarnished walks through all of it, not as a general, not as a savior, but as a reminder that endings still exist, that death can still mean something, that choices still carry weight. Every demigod domain tells the same story in a different language. Strength without purpose decays into tyranny. Endurance without hope becomes stagnation. Order without compassion becomes fear. Knowledge without humility becomes isolation. The war without end is not caused by weapons. It is caused by refusal. Refusal to change. Refusal to yield. Refusal to accept that the age they are clinging to is already over. And as the Tarnished continues forward, gathering runes and leaving silence behind, one truth becomes increasingly clear. The lands between do not need another ruler. They need an ending. In the lands between, guidance rarely speaks in full sentences. It gestures, it hints, it waits for interpretation. Those who seek direction often find themselves standing before ancient symbols rather than living voices, relics of authority that outlast memory. Among these, none are more revered or more misunderstood than the fingers. They rest in sacred places, massive and pale, shaped like hands frozen mid-gesture. Their surface is worn smooth by centuries of reverence. They do not move, they do not speak directly. They interpret. The fingers are conduits, intermediaries between the greater will and the world below. They translate intent into guidance, turning distant cosmic preference into something mortals can follow, or believe they are following. When the Tarnished first encounters them, they seem benevolent. Their presence suggests purpose, a sense that someone, somewhere, still understands what is meant to happen next. But the fingers do not explain. They issue fragments of instruction, delivered through interpreters who speak with confidence rather than certainty. Their messages are slow, often contradictory, and always incomplete. This is not because they are broken. It is because the greater will does not care to clarify. Outer gods do not guide individuals. They guide outcomes, and the fingers exist to ensure that outcomes continue, even when the system that produced them has already begun to fail. The greater will's interest is not justice. It is not peace. It is not meaning. It is continuity. As long as order, any order, persists, the greater will remains satisfied. Whether that order brings suffering or stability is irrelevant. Systems matter more than the beings within them. This becomes clearer the longer the Tarnished listens. The fingers encourage restoration of the Elden Ring, not reflection. They offer no commentary on the failures of the Golden Order. They do not acknowledge the suffering left in its wake. They simply insist that things be put back together, because broken systems cannot enforce themselves. Yet the world resists this simplicity. As the Tarnished moves forward, other voices emerge, quieter, often dismissed but persistent. They speak not from cosmic distance but from lived experience. Some question whether the greater will ever deserved obedience. Some whisper that guidance without accountability is manipulation. Some suggest that the fingers no longer hear clearly, that they repeat instructions long after their relevance has faded. There are places where the fingers' influence weakens, where their gestures are ignored, where other truths surface. In these spaces, the illusion of choice becomes visible. The Tarnished is told they are free, that they may decide the future, that their actions shape the world. And yet, every path offered leads back to the same question. Will you maintain the system, or will you refuse it? The fingers frame this as destiny. But destiny, when examined closely, is often a narrow corridor disguised as an open field. Even rebellion is anticipated. Even refusal has been accounted for. The greater will does not fear defiance. It absorbs it. Any outcome that continues existence, even in altered form, serves its purpose. This realization settles slowly. The Tarnished begins to understand that guidance has never been about choice. It has always been about momentum, keeping the world moving regardless of direction. Those who follow grace do so believing it will lead to clarity. Those who reject it do so believing rejection itself is freedom. Both paths are observed. Both are allowed. Because both sustain the system. The fingers never lie outright. They simply never tell the whole truth. And perhaps they cannot. They are relics of a time when the Golden Order functioned, when obedience felt justified, when immortality still seemed like a gift rather than a burden. Now they remain ancient, respected, and increasingly out of step with the world they claim to guide. The Tarnished does not confront them. There is no battle, no collapse of authority, just distance. A growing awareness that true agency does not come from listening more closely, but from understanding when guidance has become habit rather than wisdom. As this understanding deepens, the lands between feel less like a battlefield and more like a stage left behind by its directors. The script still exists, the cues are still given, but the meaning has drained away. And in that quiet space, between instruction and intention, something unfamiliar takes shape, not rebellion, but discernment. The Tarnished continues forward, not because the fingers gesture ahead, but because standing still would mean surrendering thought entirely. The illusion of choice fades. What remains is responsibility. When belief weakens, it does not vanish all at once. It thins. The Golden Order once defined every aspect of existence in the lands between. Life flowed into death, death returned to the Erd Tree, and grace guided those deemed worthy. Even suffering had a place within the system. It was accounted for, explained. After the shattering, that certainty dissolved, and in the absence of a single unquestioned truth, other paths began to reveal themselves. They did not rise openly. They whispered. These paths were not new. Most had existed quietly for a long time, suppressed beneath the Erd Tree's light. When order was strong, they were dismissed as heresy, madness, or irrelevance. But now, with the Golden Order fractured, these ideas found room to breathe. One path speaks of return. Those who follow it believe the world should not be held together by an imposed structure at all. They look back beyond the Erd Tree, beyond the Elden Ring, toward the ancient crucible, a time when life was unrefined, blended and free. In their view, division itself is the original sin. The separation of forms, roles and destinies created hierarchy, and hierarchy created suffering. To heal the world, they believe, all things must be drawn back together. Regression, not as a law, but as an embrace. This path offers no clarity, no protection, only surrender to something vast and unknowable. Another path speaks of distance, not rebellion, not destruction, but separation. Those drawn to this way believe the problem is not order itself, but its source. As long as outer gods impose their will upon the world, true agency will never exist. The lands between must be removed from cosmic influence altogether. This philosophy does not seek to rule. It seeks to withdraw, to sever the connection between the world and the forces that endlessly reshape it. In this vision, the world continues, imperfect, finite, uncertain, but finally its own. This path is quiet. It does not promise salvation, only autonomy. There is also a path shaped by despair. Those who walk it believe the world is already beyond repair, that every system once established inevitably becomes oppressive, that cycles cannot be escaped, only accelerated toward collapse. For them, destruction is not cruelty, it is mercy. If existence is nothing but repetition of suffering, then ending it entirely becomes an act of compassion. They do not rage against the world, they mourn it. Their fire is not born of anger, but exhaustion. Another path centers on transformation, not regression into the past, nor destruction of the present, but alteration. This belief holds that the world can be reshaped by introducing something new into its foundation, not another imposed order, but a different principle altogether. Something that replaces grace, something that allows change without stagnation. This path is uncertain, experimental, and deeply personal. It acknowledges failure, but refuses to accept inevitability. Each of these paths contradicts the others. None can exist alongside the rest, and none are presented as unquestionably correct. The Tarnished encounters fragments of these beliefs scattered across the lands between. In ruined villages, forgotten towers, quiet conversations held far from the Erd Tree's glow. Some voices are gentle, Some are desperate, some are resolute. All are shaped by disappointment. What they share is a rejection of blind obedience. They no longer ask what the greater will desires. They ask what the world needs. And the answers are never simple. The Tarnished is not forced onto any one path. That, perhaps, is the most unsettling realization of all. For the first time, choice is not framed as destiny. There is no golden line guiding the way forward, no voice promising that the right decision will fix everything. There is only consequence. To choose order is to accept control. To choose freedom is to accept uncertainty. To choose destruction is to accept finality. The lands between do not respond with approval or condemnation. They wait, and as the Tarnished draws closer to the Erdtree, carrying the weight of these possibilities, the question shifts from what can be done to what should be done. Because whatever comes next will not be temporary. The next age will define how the world remembers this one, or whether it remembers it at all. The Erdtree does not feel triumphant when you finally stand before it. It feels tired. Up close, its golden light is softer than it appeared from afar. Not radiant, not blinding, simply persistent. Its massive trunk bears scars where time and conflict have pressed against it again and again. The roots stretch outward like veins, wrapping around ruins, bones, and memories alike. This is the heart of the lands between, and yet it does not welcome you. The Erdtree stands closed, sealed by thorns that refuse entry. The symbol of eternal order now denies access even to those who have followed grace faithfully. It is not rejection born of malice. It is defense. The Golden Order, fractured and wounded, no longer knows what to allow inside. The Tarnished stands at the threshold not as a conqueror, but as a question. Everything that has led here, every demigod defeated, every great rune claimed, every path walked through decay and ruin, has narrowed into this single moment. Not action, decision. The Erdtree does not speak. It never has. Instead, echoes gather around it, remnants of belief, fragments of doctrine, interpretations layered so thick that the original intent is almost impossible to find. You feel them pressing inward. The pull of restoration, the promise of continuity, the comfort of familiarity. Rebuilding the Elden Ring would not be difficult now. The fragments are ready. The system knows how to repair itself. It has done so many times before. Order restored, grace renewed, the world continuing on its well-worn path. There is a strange comfort in that. No uncertainty, no risk of collapse, no responsibility beyond maintenance. And yet, something resists. Not loudly, not violently, just enough to be felt. Because you have seen what order preserved too long becomes. You have walked through lands where immortality hollowed meaning. You have met beings who lived forever, but forgot why they lived at all. You have seen stagnation dressed as stability. Around the Erdtree, time feels suspended. The air is still. The world seems to hold its breath, not because it expects salvation, but because it knows something irreversible is about to happen. This is where every philosophy you encountered converges. The finger's insistence on continuity, the quiet defiance of those who turned away, the despair of those who wished for an ending, the hope of those who believed transformation was possible. None of them stand beside you now. This choice cannot be delegated. If you restore the ring, the world will survive, familiar, controlled, imperfect, but recognizable. Suffering will continue, but so will structure. The cycle will endure, just as it always has. If you refuse, the world will change how no one can say with certainty. Perhaps it will heal, perhaps it will fracture further, perhaps it will simply end. Uncertainty is frightening, but certainty has already failed once. The Erdtree waits not as a judge, but as a relic of trust long exhausted. It does not care what you choose, it only reacts. This is the final truth of the lands between. The world was never protected by gods. It was managed. And now, management has reached its limit. As the Tarnished stands before the Erdtree, the meaning of grace becomes clear. It was never faith. It was never love. It was a leash. Guidance designed to bring you here, not to ensure you chose wisely. And yet, the leash is slack now. For the first time since the golden star fell from the void, the world does not know what comes next. The Erdtree's light flickers gently, not threatening, not pleading, just present, waiting. In the end, the world does not resolve itself. It does not arrive at a single perfect conclusion. It does not settle into clarity. It continues. Whatever choice is made beneath the Erdtree, the lands between do not suddenly become whole. The scars remain. The ruins do not rebuild themselves. The memories of war do not fade simply because a new age has been declared. The ending is not an ending at all. It is a transition. If the Elden Ring is restored, order returns, but not innocence. The Golden Order rises again, altered by fracture, reinforced by familiarity. Grace flows more steadily, systems resume their function. Life continues, but so does stagnation. The same structures remain in place, the same hierarchies, the same quiet suffering that once hid beneath golden light. Stability returns, but meaning does not automatically follow. If a different path is chosen, one that distances the world from outer influence, the lands between grow quieter, gods recede, guidance weakens, mortality regains its weight, life becomes fragile again, and fragile things must choose carefully how they live. No matter the path, one truth remains constant. The world does not thank you. There are no crowds, no celebrations, no voices declaring the future secure. The lands between accept, change the way they accept decay, slowly, without commentary. This is because Elden Ring was never a story about saving the world. It was a story about inhabiting one, about existing within systems you did not create, about deciding whether to uphold them, reshape them, or walk away, knowing that none of those choices guarantee happiness. The Tarnished does not become a hero in the traditional sense. They become a participant, someone who stood at the edge of inevitability and chose something, even when no choice promised relief. And then, time moves forward, or sideways, or loops back upon itself. The Erdtree still stands, whether blazing or dim. Ruins still gather dust. New stories begin quietly, far from thrones and runes. People live, struggle, forget, and continue. Cycles persist not because they are unstoppable, but because they are comfortable. Endings are difficult. Continuation is easy. This is why the final image of Elden Ring is not triumph, but stillness. A world that breathes softly, uncertain of its future, yet unwilling to collapse. The Tarnished fades from the center of the story, not erased, but absorbed. Their actions become background. Their decision becomes foundation rather than focus. This is how ages pass. Not with fireworks, but with quiet agreement. Elden Ring does not ask whether you chose correctly. It asks whether you understood the weight of choosing at all. And perhaps that is the final comfort the lands between offer, that even in a world shaped by distant gods, broken systems, and endless repetition, Meaning can still exist in awareness, not in victory, not in permanence, but in the act of standing still long enough to decide. The ending does not close the book, it simply places it back on the shelf, waiting for another hand to reach for it. And somewhere, far from the Erdtree's shadow, another story is already beginning. And here the story of the lands between comes to rest. The Erdtree still stands. The world continues to breathe, and the echoes of gods and mortals alike slowly fade into silence. You've wandered through ancient ages, broken orders, and quiet choices, not to conquer them, but simply to listen. And now, there's nothing left to hold on to. Let the details drift away. Let the names soften and blur. Let the world grow distant. Thank you for spending this time with Games Lore to Sleep. If this journey through the entire lore of Elden Ring helped slow your thoughts or ease you toward rest, a gentle like lets the channel grow, and subscribing ensures more long, quiet stories will be here when you need them. There are many worlds still waiting, many forgotten ages yet to be told. For now, allow yourself to sleep. The lands between will remain, whether you remember them or not. Good night, Tarnished, and may your rest be deep and undisturbed.